All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Measure Y Community Forum. My name is Zeb Wellborn. I'm the president of the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce. Before I begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. First, please silence your cell phones. Second is we do have restrooms, so restrooms are beyond that door into the aisleway there. If you haven't already, please submit your questions on the question cards. So there are question cards in the back. If you haven't got them already, you're welcome to fill those out. Submit them to this table over here if you have any questions that are revolved around Measure Y. We're also filming today's forum, and it's going to be made available on Channel 3, the city's YouTube channel, and at www.cityofchino.org/MeasureY. Today we'll be learning more about Measure Y, a ballot measure Chino voters will be voting on in the upcoming statewide direct primary election on June 7th, and answering your frequently asked questions. Helping us to achieve our objective this evening are our panelists, Chino Mayor Eunice Ulloa, Chino City Council Member Christopher Flores, and the City of Chino Director of Development Services, Nicholas Ligori. We will kick things off with a presentation from Mr. Ligori that will give us some background on the measure and how it came to find its way on the ballot. After the presentation, our panelists will answer your questions as well as a few that we've received online. Nick, take it away.
Thank you, Zeb. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with this informational presentation on the City of Chino's housing element as well as Measure Y, which is a local initiative that's on the June 7th ballot. Let's see if I can get my slideshow to work. All right. Okay. So there's been a lot of news articles, a lot of headlines. I'm sure you've all heard about the state of housing affordability in California. And I'm sure we all know someone right now that's trying to buy a house or rent a house or apartment right now, and how expensive it is. And in Chino, this is important to us because we really love our community, residents of Chino. We think it's one of the best around in Southern California, and we'd like to see, if we have kids, we'd like to see our kids be able to stay here and raise their families, or if we have family members that live other places and want to move closer. And also, another thing to consider is that having a healthy residential base within the city helps grow the economy of the city and helps make sure that the city can continue to provide high-quality services long-term. And also, one of the goals of the city for a long time has been to provide a lot of different housing choices for everybody, for different lifestyles and different ages and stages of life. And so that's why we have a focus on the housing for the city and the housing element. And it's also important, if you get the next slide, that in Chino, we've really cared deeply about this issue and how and where the city has grown over time. And because of that, in 1988, the citizens of Chino adopted Measure M, which was a local growth control measure, and essentially it froze the city in time in terms of residential development and planned residential development. So under the terms of Measure M, anywhere in the city that was in the corporate boundaries in 1988, cannot increase. We can't increase the number of houses on any piece of land without getting approval by the voters. And so that's the structure of Measure M. Measure M says anytime we want to increase the amount of houses on any piece of land that is above what the general plan says, we have to get it approved by the voters. Next slide. So that general plan is a plan for the city's growth and development over time. Covers a lot of different areas. One piece of that plan is called the housing element. It's a chapter of the plan, basically. And the housing element is required by state law to be updated every 8 years. And the purpose of the housing element is to plan for an adequate supply of housing to meet existing housing need in the community and future need in the community, and to meet those needs at various income levels, all the way from the lowest wage earners to the highest wage earners. We have to plan for that. Now, the city currently has a housing element that complies with all of the state's requirements for the previous 8-year cycle. And the city receives funds from the state for a number of projects because our housing element is in compliance with state law. Cities that don't have compliant housing elements are subject to penalties, fines, judgments, and even the loss of the ability to approve or disapprove development projects. As well, they're not eligible for any of the state funds for housing and transportation projects that require an approved housing element. So in January of this year, the City Council adopted a revised housing element for the next 8-year cycle. So that's the 2021 to 2029 period. And that housing element is pending approval by the state right now. Next slide. As part of the housing element process and updating the housing element, city staff and a consultant team conducted extensive public outreach, and we have multiple workshops with city council, with the public. We convened a citizen steering committee that gave us different ideas, and we had an online survey for the community where we solicited opinions about how the city should plan for this growth that the state is requiring us to do. Next slide. Now, the amount of growth assigned to us by the state is encapsulated in a regional housing needs assessment, or RHNA number. So if you're reading the daily bulletin, or if you're looking at the Champion, you know that different cities around the state have had this RHNA number imposed on them by the state, and that these cities have to find sites to accommodate this growth. So this RHNA number is a housing number calculated by the state, and it's assigned to cities, and there's a calculation that's done to figure out how much growth each city gets, and it's based upon regional trends for growth, available land for housing, and local employment characteristics. And across the state, this time around, this cycle, the RHNA numbers are higher than they've ever been. Next slide. So for the city to have a housing element that meets those requirements of state law, so that we don't have these penalties imposed on us, that we can continue to get the state funding for various programs that we use it for, we're required to show where in the city we can accommodate these RHNA numbers, these numbers of homes. And these numbers of homes are at various densities, at various affordability levels. And we have to find places that are at least half have to be vacant land, so something that you could build on right away. And then the other half, up to 50%, can be what we would consider underutilized properties. So these are properties where maybe it's a large piece of land, but there's, maybe there's a strawberry patch on it, or maybe there's just a single commercial building with a lot of unused property around it. So that's what we would consider underutilized. So we have to look at that, those vacant and underutilized land. And we also have to look at a variety of densities. So in the bottom two categories, that would be developed at 30 units per acre. So that's like a 3-story walk-up apartment. In the middle category, or moderate, it would be 20 units per acre, which is more like a townhome. And then anything less than that would be what we consider above market. The city's number is 6978. It's really large, and a good chunk of that is in the lower tiers of affordability. Next slide, please. So how do we come up? Where do we put all of this? How do we find a spot or spots that will meet all of the state law requirements and still try to not disrupt the character of the city and what has been built over time? And so that's where we go through this process of selecting the sites. Now, as part of this housing element update, the city council directed our staff and our consultant to basically make a scorecard. We call it a metrics-based analysis, but it was really a scorecard. We took all these available sites, there's a whole lot of them, and we scored each of them based upon the size of the site, if it was adjacent to transportation corridors or mass transit, if it was on a major thoroughfare, what kind of amenities were near the site. So is there shopping, is there park and open space, and also a modifier if it would potentially disrupt a already existing neighborhood. And so we score all these sites, and we have to get a minimum number of sites, but we chose only the best ones that could meet all of the criteria established by the council. So next slide. So at the conclusion of that, we landed on 91 different sites throughout the city. And so all of those sites, the 91 sites that are the subject of Measure Y, would facilitate the city being able to have a housing element that meets all of the state requirements for the number of the homes that would need to be built. Now, the approach to that is by using, and we call it overlay. I'm just going to shorten it and say it's an opportunity. So what that means is that the property owner has existing zoning. Some of these sites are commercial, some of them are higher density residential already, some of them are lower density residential sites. And the property owner today or in the future could build whatever it's zoned for currently. But if Measure Y passes, they would have the opportunity to be able to utilize the overlay to build either at a higher density or to build a mixed-use development, which when we say mixed-use, that means basically commercial and residential together. So that's something that's a little bit more of a dynamic environment, and it would have the ability to have both some retail or office and residential included. So those opportunity sites allow for somebody, again, to be able to use that if they choose. Planning and development are two different things. The state requirement is for us to plan for these sites that can meet our required numbers. But we don't have to build anything on it. In fact, the city is not responsible for any of the construction. It's up to the private market to respond and to build if they so choose. Now, both of these sites, all of these 91 areas, they represent 1.2% of the total land area and 1/3 of 1% of all parcels in the city. Next slide. So I've got a couple of maps in the back that illustrate. One is we call the affordable housing overlay. So those would be the sites that would be limited to just residential development. Next slide. And then the other overlay or opportunity zone is what would be limited to the mixed use. So that would allow for both commercial and residential. Next slide. So to have a compliant housing element, if I can just summarize, we have to meet the requirements of state law, and we have to meet our RHNA obligation. And there's a lot at stake for the city, because if we don't have a compliant housing element, again, we could face a risk of being sued by the state, having fines up to between $10,000 and $100,000 a month levied by us, or levied on us by the state. And we could potentially have adverse judgments or challenges of other land use decisions that the city makes. Next slide. So to comply with all of these requirements from the state, while also requiring with the requirements of Measure M, because remember, Measure M says we need to get approval of the voters if we're going to allow for sites to have an increase in the number of homes or density on each one. To do that, the council initiated a ballot measure to go before the voters on June 7th, and that's Measure Y. So if Measure Y is approved by the voters, it will permit the city to have the use of these overlay zones or opportunity zones, and it will meet our requirements for planning under state law. It doesn't change anything about Measure Y. So Measure Y, or I'm sorry, it doesn't change anything about Measure M. So Measure M stays intact. If Measure Y is defeated, then the city's housing element will not be compliant with state law. And so that could result in the negative consequences that I was talking about previously. Next slide. So that's part of why we're here tonight, is to provide information to voters of the city of Chino so that they can make the best decision possible for them. And we have been having several of these informational presentations throughout the last month. This is our final public forum. However, if you'd like more information, you can visit the city's website. We have a dedicated page to Measure Y. You can also call City Hall. You can talk to me or one of our planning staff. We'd love to have an in-depth conversation about state housing policy and how it relates to Measure Y. You can email housing@cityofchino.org, and we will respond to your email. And then also, you can check out our social media feeds. We have regular informational posts. The election is in 2 weeks, so we will continue to do that up until the date of the election, again, to continue to inform the public about the measure. And so that concludes my presentation. So I'll hand it back to Zeb.
All right. Well, thank you, Nick. So as mentioned previously, if you haven't already done so and you still have questions, feel free to head back to the back. You can do this at any point during our presentation. Fill out a question card and submit it to Ariana and the team over there. With that, I am going to go over some questions that were received online and that people have been asked about this. So let's talk about the future of housing in Chino. What does the future of housing look like in the city of Chino?
My opinion. Oh, hello. Okay. Let's try that again. Well. Okay. There we go. Okay, we can share. So my opinion on that is, it doesn't look a lot different than it looks today. We have a lot of areas in the city that where we're not going to see a lot of change. The housing stock in Chino is really not that old. We had some growth periods in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then again in the early 2000s and into today. We had two large master plan communities, the College Park and the Preserve. College Park is almost built out, and the Preserve is probably about 50% complete. And so I think, we'll continue to see a lot of neighborhood structures remain the same. I think what we will see is we will see some intensification of land where it makes sense, and I think that's primarily on areas like Central Avenue and Riverside Drive, maybe Edison, Euclid Avenue, where there's already a good amount of infrastructure there to help serve, the flow of people and address kind of regional issues and facilitate people getting to the 60 and the 91 freeways and movement like that. So I think, but because land values are increasing, I think we will see some intensification of some of these areas, including potentially 3-story development. I also think you'll see for people that live in a kind of a standard, single-family residential neighborhood, I think you'll see, some of your neighbors maybe doing additions or maybe building a second dwelling unit or something like that because property values are pretty high. I know personally. My mom and dad live in a second unit on our lot because it's just it was a better way to get a better quality of life for both of our families because property values are relatively high. So I also think you'll see more of that.
And I also want to give an opportunity to our other panelists. So if you want to chime in on any of this, please let me know.
Nick mentioned, Nick mentioned that you'll see additional units on properties, which is primarily going to happen on larger lots because of some state legislature that was passed, SB 9, which allows people to convert garages into living space now. They can also add on to their home for an additional unit, plus build a separate unit on their property. And the city, we have no say in that. So even though it's zoned 1 per lot, people could essentially build 2 plus convert a garage and increase the size of their house. That's the state's way of facing a shortage in housing. The problem with that is sadly enough, it's going to change the makeup of some of our neighborhoods. And I hope that people understand that we have nothing to say about that. The only thing we can enforce are building codes, which are setbacks on properties and, of course, safety and regular building code issues that have to be complied with. But the state is determined to add housing in any way it can, whether it's through this RHNA method or through methods like SB 9, which forces us to allow additional units on properties. One thing that Nick didn't mention is that if Measure Y does not pass and we are found non-compliant with our housing element, the state could actually come down and tell us where the houses are going to be built. So it takes away local control. So what we've done is we have attempted to identify locations where this higher density makes sense. We've also done an overlay on some properties. You're all familiar probably with the northwest corner of Central and Walnut Avenue, a shopping center that's really run down. We did an overlay on that in hopes of encouraging the family to renovate that shopping center and perhaps do something innovative like stores on the bottom and apartments on top. So we have attempted to locate properties that won't affect current neighborhoods And where it makes sense, like Nick said, on major thoroughfares like Euclid, Riverside Drive, Edison Avenue, and keep them out of the neighborhoods. But again, the danger is, if the citizens don't trust us in what we're trying to do with an overlay, then the state could come in and say, okay, you have a big parking lot out here by the senior centers, you're gonna put 30 units per acre there. They could dictate where these homes have to be built. So we're hoping that we'll still maintain a semblance of local control with Measure Y.
So I'm gonna just repeat the question since I'm the third person on the panel, so I just want to remind everyone of the question. That was, what does the future of housing look like in Chino? For me, when I think of this, some of the other panelists have already touched on a lot of points, but for the city of Chino, one thing that we've always wanted to provide to homeowners and people looking to buy in the city of Chino is to offer an opportunity. If you like your traditional homes, we offer that. If you like more high-density homes, we offer that as well, particularly in the south end of Chino, and that's ultimately what we're trying to stick to. And I would say that with the considering this measure, it is it's really all about staying state compliance, right? Complying with the state. But again, I just want to reiterate that the city of Chino, our goal is to provide people opportunities. Again, if you like high density, that's something we do provide still, south end of Chino. If you like your old traditional low density homes, that's something we want to stick to and remain with, and that's something we provide in the north end of Chino. And that's my answer.
And I would like to rotate the first answer. So Mayor Lowe, I want to give this next question to you. Are we looking at high rises across Chino because of this housing element?
No, we're not looking at high rises. The highest we will go is, and there is some development already on North Central, is the 3-story, which, like I said, we already do have some up there. But no, we're not looking at high rises. I know some of our neighboring cities now are going 4 stories, and I think even in Rancho Cucamonga, I think they have a couple that are 5 stories. But no, we're not looking at that. The challenge in the state mandate of 30 per acre is, and I have to be really honest with you, we live on an acre, and I cannot imagine 30 homes on our piece of property. It just is beyond my imagination, but it is what the state is mandating. But the challenge with building that kind of density is, what do you do with parking? A lot of times they have to put underground parking, which of course drives the cost up. So to say that the state somehow equates low-income housing with 30 per acre, it's more expensive to build because you have to do the parking underneath and all the fortification of going higher, than a 1 or a 2-story. So, yeah, it's a little baffling. But I wanted to piggyback on something that Chris has said too, and what I've always called it is balanced growth. My dream starting, feels like 100 years ago now, was to have something for everyone. And that is, if you want to start with an apartment, you can, condominium, townhome, single-family home, even a larger lot if you want to, have an RV at home or have some farm animals or whatever. My dream for our community is still that. And I think it's worth fighting for, even though a lot of our development community just wants to go to high density. Chino is not a high density community. There's still little pieces of us that are rural. Most people moved here to get away from high density. So we're trying our best to fight the push for higher density. We do have to comply with law, and so we're trying to do it the best we know how.
And don't feel obligated to answer each question if it's already been covered, but feel free, Chris, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, simply put, are we looking at high rises across Chino because of the housing element? As the mayor mentioned, I mean, no.
All right, next question, Chris, this one is for you, or starting with you. And I know it's kind of been covered, but is the housing element required by state law?
It is required by state law, and as our mayor mentioned, I mean, to keep it short, non-compliance basically turns local control over to the state. And that is something we absolutely want to stay away from. And
Mayor?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Perfect. Now I know that there's all these sites that have been identified, but does that actually mean that these things are going to be developed? Is that a guarantee that these will be developed? Nick?
No, it's really reliant upon property owners and private capital to make development happen. The city's only requirement under the housing element, the state laws regarding the housing element, are to provide the sites. So we have to make sure that the sites are zoned appropriately to facilitate development. But beyond that, it's up to private industry to develop those sites.
Mayor?
Next is what happens if a city is not compliant with state law. Nick mentioned there can be financial incentives, so to speak, fines that can be pretty stiff, up to I think it's $100,000 a month that we can be fined if we're not in compliance. Worse than that, I think, is that the state could actually come down and decide where these homes are going to be built, or change the zoning where they want them to be built. So it would be a total loss of local control.
Okay, perfect. And we just moved on to that next question, which is what happens if a city is not compliant with state law? Chris, do you have anything to add about either one of those?
no, I think, another thing that possibly can be added is when we start, talking about possible litigation, which is something we'd absolutely want to stay away from with the state. And, that's just extra cost, extra attorney fees cost to the residents, and that's the last thing we want for the city of Chino.
Yeah, there's been several cities that have not been able to, for several reasons, achieve a certified housing element, and some of them have been sued by the state, like the city of Huntington Beach. Currently, there are 5 cities that are being sued by an affordable housing advocacy group for not being far enough along in the process of getting their housing elements certified. The city of Encinitas in San Diego County had a similar growth control measure to Chino's, and the city council did outreach and worked extensively with the community 2 times to put a ballot measure on the ballot to adopt their housing element. Both times it failed, and when 3 different affordable housing advocacy groups sued the city for that, the judge in that case essentially said that the will of the people needed to be overridden by the needs of the state. And so the judge set aside the city's growth control measure and put the housing element and sites inventory into place unilaterally. So we are looking at some pretty dramatic consequences as a result of a defeat of Measure Y.
Perfect. And then Mayor, I know you've articulated a little bit already, but can you expand on this one? Why is it important for the city to be in control of our housing decisions?
We want our neighborhoods to be consistent. We want people to know that when they purchase a house in a certain neighborhood, that the makeup of that neighborhood will stay the same. I can't imagine what it would be like to invest your life savings and buy your dream home, whatever it happens to be, and then have the whole neighborhood around you change. It's very important for us to maintain our neighborhoods. And I think if we lose local control, and the state does come in and intervene, we could lose the community that we have. It's bad enough that we're forced to comply with state requirements, but to lose all control, I can't even imagine. I mean, if we cannot control what is built in our community, then If you have a vacant lot next to your house, you may end up with, I don't know, a car repair place next door to you, or, who knows whatever it is that you would not want to live next door to. Our neighborhoods are very important, and we've done a lot of master planning, like in College Park and down in the Preserve, so that we have cohesive neighborhoods that make sense. I think that's one of the nice things about Chino, is that we have quality housing and quality neighborhoods. Shopping needs to be in logical places. High density needs to be in logical places. Our neighborhoods need to be protected. And if we don't control our housing element and our housing decisions, then we could lose the quality of life that we have.
Perfect. So Chris, and again, I know that some of these are repetitive, but these are the questions that have been asked, and it also helps just to reiterate what the solution is. But how do we maintain local control?
Well, we maintain local control. Zeb, I would say that we maintain local control by, well, number one, I want to give just a huge thank you for everyone who's in the audience right now. Thank you for coming out today. I think, maintaining control starts at this level, right? A big reason why I joined the council is because they said if, real change, happens at the local level. And when we start losing control and we start not abiding by some of these state laws, and the state comes and tries to take over, then we lose that, right? And I think it starts with the residents, just showing up to these seminars and just understanding what this measure is about, what exactly is happening at the local level. That would be my answer. It starts with the people, right? It starts with the people, with our watchdogs, those who really care about housing and the future of housing for the city of Chino. And second responsibility comes from the side of the city of Chino, making sure we divulge all the right information that the residents need, all the information that the residents are asking for, and just being transparent. And that's exactly why we're here today.
Chris is right. It starts with you. It starts with your involvement. It starts with you paying attention to what happens. It starts with you being boisterous. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you don't like. It doesn't mean that we can always comply with your needs, but we need to know what you want in your community. We all live here, but we don't always know exactly the right decision to make. Staff does the best job that they can. We try to do a tremendous amount of outreach to inform the public what's going on. I get it, that everybody's busy. You're busy raising families and putting food on the table and working your job, raising your kids or your grandkids, or, taking care of life. It's tough to keep your finger on the pulse and know what's going on. But reach out when you have a concern. Let us know what your thoughts are, and please be involved. I know there's people that are going to be watching this from their home, which is fine. Not everybody can come down and actually visit meetings, which I understand. But stay involved. Stay involved in your community, because you're invested here. Your lives are here. You work here. You play here. Go to school here. Recreate here. This is your community, and we need to hear from you. So maintaining local control, we try to represent you the best we can, but we need to hear from you. Your thoughts and your desires don't come through the air. We need to hear from you. We need to know how you feel about things. And the other thing, too, is please vote. Please educate yourself on what our state legislators are doing, how they're voting on things. Do a little research. Don't just vote because you recognize somebody's name, or because there's an R or a D or an I or whatever after their name. Please do some research and find out how people are voting on these issues. You might be very surprised. You might be very surprised, but the control comes from you, and you need to be involved. So please, please, please stay involved.
Perfect. And then, Nicholas, this one's for you. We know you talked about mixed use, which is commercial and residential, but does Measure Y discuss other land uses, so maybe industrial, maybe office, maybe retail? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Certainly. So Measure Y, specifically addresses the sites that are identified in the housing element for either the affordable overlay or the mixed-use overlay. So it doesn't address development of any other type of land use. We have 91 sites. 44 of those sites are for housing only, and 47 of those sites will allow mixed use, which is housing and either retail or office. So more conventional commercial, but not heavy commercial, not manufacturing, not warehousing, not industrial. None of those uses are have anything to do with Measure Y.
Okay, and then as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, I wanted to make sure we asked some, how is this impacting our businesses? So Mayor Ulloa, can you share a little bit about how this could potentially impact businesses?
Absolutely. Businesses locate here because of our population base, because of our citizenry. We have a healthy community with healthy reserves. We have a good, balanced budget. Companies want to be here because we have a good, solid community. If the housing changes and where people don't want to live here anymore, then we'll lose that good basis that we have. So businesses should absolutely care about this measure, and they should be involved. Because again, it's their quality of life as well. Businesses want to be where a community is healthy and thriving. We're a very popular place to be. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know our vacancy rate is extremely low, especially compared to a lot of our neighbors. Yes, we do have some shopping centers that are not doing too well because they're run down. That happens to be a business decision by the owners of those shopping centers. But the majority of our buildings are completely built out, completely occupied, and it's because businesses want to be here. Again, it's a quality of life. It's a quality of a community. So yes, businesses should be involved. They should care, and they should pay attention.
Okay, and then I want to point this one at Nicholas. Nicholas, how does Measure Y impact our local economy? One of the things that our businesses are, one of the challenges they are facing right now is workforce shortage. A lot of our businesses are having a real tough time identifying and finding employees. So can you talk about the impact to our local economy and specifically to our workforce challenges?
Certainly. So generally, construction activity in and of itself brings money into the local economy because you have workers coming from different areas. They're acquiring materials. They are doing their own commerce in the city. And so there are some benefits, but those are short-term benefits. The longer-term benefits is by building the residential base, you have more population, you have more shoppers within a particular area that increases the sales tax base. So more people buying goods and services in the area, and that will increase economic activity. In terms of workforce, by expanding the variety of housing, you have access as a city to a variety of people at various levels within the economy and within the workforce. So you can be hiring for entry level all the way up to executive. And if we think about in terms of the environment and greenhouse gas emissions and just right now plain cost of gas, we all want to work closer to where we live. And so to have a variety of housing in the city will also allow for a variety of different people from which workers, employers can draw from for the workforce. Although the other side of the coin is that we need workers to actually build buildings, which there's a shortage of right now as well. So.
Okay, and then this is the last question on my list. Why does Measure Y matter to property owners?
You want to tackle that?
So, I was just thinking about this, so I'm glad this question came up. Well, there's different property owners, right, in this scenario. There's different property owners who are gonna be affected differently, so I think it's important to kind of understand the different, right, types of property owners that are involved. Number one, I would say for those property owners whose, parcels of land or property has been identified as a site, I mean, there's huge opportunity for that particular property owner, right? Once you put this overlay on that type of property, it basically gives the property owner more opportunity to grow and develop how he or she may. And the key word here for me is, right, it even incentivizes some of these property owners to want to build some of these, underutilized properties. So off the bat, it definitely adds value if, one of your properties is identified as a site. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's different types of property owners, but that's the one I was just thinking of. And maybe some of the other couple panelists may want to touch on other ways that property owners can be, why it should matter to them.
Well, Chris is right. The people who own the property that has the overlay on it, it does give them an opportunity for a development, but they don't lose the current zoning that they have right now, which I think is critical. In the past, when we went through our housing elements, we actually had to change the zoning. Some properties got changed to the RD30 to meet the state mandates. That can never be downzoned. It could never be decreased. So say a person owns property that in a past housing element we zoned as RD30, and then say they have an opportunity to sell their land, somebody wants to build, 4 per acre or whatever, they can't do that. We're not allowed to downzone property once it's upzoned to meet the state needs. The overlay, Nick uses the word opportunity, it provides an opportunity for that landowner to either stay with their current zoning or use the overlay, and whether it's mixed use or a higher density. So it provides more opportunity for that landowner. But the reason why it matters to other property owners is, again, and I've already harped on this, but to maintain quality of life. You don't want the state coming in and changing zoning near you when you live in a neighborhood that has a certain makeup. We also need to have this higher density in corridors that make sense. Needs to be on major transportation corridors, not in the middle of a residential area. So it needs to be on Riverside Drive, Central Avenue, Euclid Avenue, Edison Avenue. It needs to be on major corridors where there's bus lines, where there's shopping opportunities, not in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Let's say, which we haven't done, but let's just say that the city decided, or the state comes in and says again, oh, you have a big parking lot there that's usually not utilized. We're going to put 30 per acre on that parking lot. Well, that would completely change this neighborhood. So you can imagine even in your own neighborhoods, if there are lots that are undeveloped, you would not want somebody to come in and change that zoning drastically. So I think all of us that have property here, we need to be concerned with maintaining local control and making sure that Measure Y passes so that we don't have the state intruding and telling us where this development's going to happen.
Yeah, I think simply put, Measure Y is the city's best attempt at working with the community to find consensus on where growth could be located that's we're required to plan for by the state. And so we went through an extensive process and talked to a lot of different community members and got a lot of different input to come up with the plan that's represented by Measure Y. And so it's the city's best attempt to meet those state requirements while also meeting the requirements of Measure M as well as the will of the citizens of Chino.
Excellent. And then I want to give the opportunity for one very quick comment in closer, 1 or 2 sentences from each of you. Councilmember Flores.
You know, it's been said that we're in a water drought right now when we have all these RHNA numbers to meet according to the state. Make it make sense, right? But with your participation, with your involvement, you know, the city of Chino can move forward together, put this behind us, and just focus on our balanced growth, as the mayor mentioned earlier. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the opportunity, and have a good night.
Excellent. Mayor Ulloa.
Just thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about our community. Thank you for caring enough to be involved tonight, whether you watch online or are here. We have a very special community, and we need to take care of it. So thank you very much for your caring.
I have to say, you know, I've been with the city 18 years, and we've done a lot of different planning processes and projects, and I feel really, really good about the work that the city has done with our housing element and with our educational campaign about Measure Y. All of the information is out there. It's readily accessible. You can go on our website and you can find the addresses and parcel numbers of the specific sites. We have a lot of maps on there. We have the full text of the measure and how it would work. And so we're really being completely transparent about everything and really just kind of sharing with the voters that, again, this is our best attempt to meet what the citizens want, but also meet the requirements that the state is imposing on us.
All right, excellent. Well, panel, thank you very much. We hope we completed our goal tonight and that you walk away feeling more informed about Measure Y. Our goal here was education today, making sure you're fully informed of what that means. Thank you all for joining us. If we didn't get to your question tonight, you should bookmark www.cityofchino.org/Measure Y. They will post any additional questions, anything that we missed, along with the video to this forum and other updates as they might come along. I want to thank you again to our panelists for joining us this evening, and I want to encourage you all to vote on June 7th. Thank you for coming. Have a great evening.